Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to day one of Harper Macleod's inaugural Marine Economy Week, a series of daily webinars examining all aspects of Scotland's prosperous and diverse marine economy. My name is Chris Kerr and I'm a partner at Harper Macleod and I head up the marine economy team here. Thank you for joining us. The range and quality of organisations and individuals who have registered to join is testament to the diversity of the marine economy sector. And we're genuinely pleased with the response to the week so far. In terms of housekeeping, you'll have seen that when you logged in, we are going to be recording the session. And in terms of your cameras and microphones, they are off for the purposes of the webinar today, but we would still very much like to hear your views. There's going to be the chat box function open throughout the session today, and that's available for you to lodge any questions or start any conversations. If there are any questions that we don't manage to get to today or don't know the answers to today, then we'll follow up with answers post-event. From a social media point of view, if you're tweeting, please feel free to use the tweet or post about the week using hashtag MEW21. And the speaker slides will be available after the event today, which we will send out to you following today's session. So, what are we talking about when we talk about marine economy? Sometimes it's referred to as the blue economy. The marine economy is large and diverse. One of the main reasons that the scale of the marine sector seems to be often overlooked is that it can be hard to define exactly how broadly its definition stretches. In trying to define it, you're best just thinking about anything related to water. We see that as including anything from marine and offshore training, all things aquaculture and fisheries, marine energy and renewables, offshore oil and gas and decommissioning, water-related infrastructure such as ports and harbours, marine logistics and transport, ship and boat building, marine tourism and coastal developments, to all of those active in the R&D, technology and biotech and innovation space. And of course, you've then got all the supply chains that go with all of the strands that I've just mentioned. So putting this in context, several years ago, we recognised the importance of Scotland's modern rural economy to the overall Scottish economy. And we repositioned part of our business offering to talk in more coherent terms to the rural economy where so many of our clients live, work and do business, making use of Scotland's natural capital. Since then, we've been passionate about increasing the profile of Scotland's rural economy, and the marine economy is a very large part of Scotland's rural economy. The team at Harper Macleod have been getting involved in more and more aspects of this diverse sector over the last few years. And in addition to all of the areas of the law you would expect of us to be doing, a sample of work types on our desk would include buying and selling and chartering and financing of vessels, boat and ship build contracts, intellectual property advice for subsea matters, working with owners and users of underwater tech and biotech, various mandates for clients within the seafood industry, procurement advice for marine infrastructure projects, health and safety, food labelling advice, and warranty and collision claims advice, along with transfer of fishing quotas or seabed leasing matters, to name but a few. A significant driver for us has been the geography of our offices. Our unique office footprint in Shetland, Inverness, Elgin, Glasgow and Edinburgh has exposed us to types of marine and maritime connections on a very regular basis. Throughout the course of this week, we'll try to bring to you as many of those components of the marine economy as we can and bring a few things to life in the process. But please forgive me. In doing so, I suspect there are liable to be a number of intentional and unintentional puns. So let's dive right in. Why are we hosting the week? Many of you will be fully aware of the scale, value and importance of the marine economy in Scotland. We'll hear some of that detail later in this session. Having recognised this, we decided to create the event with a view to helping to communicate the scale of the opportunity and to lend a hand to the multiple stakeholders in raising awareness and keeping its significance on the radar of decision makers and policy makers. In doing so, we acknowledge that the sector encompasses a vast range of stakeholders, meaning that interests aren't always necessarily aligned. But Scotland benefits from an abundance of natural assets, and this is something that is increasingly being recognised as central to the country's prosperity and fundamental to the health of our overall economy. This natural capital also means that Scotland has a worldwide footprint through its exports, whether they be exports for consumption exports for tourism purposes, or exports for leading-edge marine science, research, innovation and training. So why are we doing this now? The timing of the Marine Economy Week, we feel, is important. As Scotland and the rest of the UK look to break free from the pandemic and look to navigate in a post-Brexit world, the marine economy is undoubtedly going to be more important, possibly more vocal, and play a bigger part on a worldwide stage. Add to this the increasing focus on sustainability and change occurring throughout all parts of society and the wider economy, and the redoubling of rural and marine-related businesses in their commitments as stewards of the environment. Many operators and communities are recognising the need to develop long-term environmental strategies which realise the potential of our natural assets whilst having as little an impact as possible on the wider environment. So all of that strikes us as making the timing as relevant as ever. What else should we look for over the course of the week, or look for in the context of the marine economy influences at the moment? Well, as touched upon, we can't ignore COVID and the UK-EU post-Brexit relationship impacts. Both of these factors have heavily impacted Scotland's exportation of fresh fish and have been heavily reported as placing the sector under a severe degree of strain and pressure. The ability to sustain fish stocks and feed the growing population is one that continues to need attention. It's estimated the global population will be 10 billion plus by 2050 and lead to over 50% increase in the demand for animal protein throughout the globe. Innovative aquaculture solutions such as land-based fish farming, for example, are viewed as one means by which to address this issue and to ensure that global fish stocks are fished in a sustainable manner. Then you've got the Scottish Government target for carbon neutrality. They're aiming to be 5 years ahead of the rest of the UK. That will surely lead to opportunity and innovative solutions entering the market as people look to provide novel ways for the market to expand and maintain operations whilst achieving net zero. Many of the current activities in the market, by dint of that target, will need to transition through a complete overhaul in order to achieve a net zero target. There's also other matters on the horizon presenting real opportunity for collaboration and innovation. You'll no doubt be aware of the Scottish Government's Blue Economy Action Plan. We've also got other developments emerging in clean tech and green initiatives. And then in Scotland, through a slightly different lens, there's been real momentum building for onshore community buyout projects. And we've recently been involved in one project in the Western Isles, which involved the community buying an area of foreshore. So perhaps that's a sign of more to come. In other news, we also wait to hear what's going to happen in relation to planned free ports policy, which was announced in the recent budget, where there was 8 of those announced in England, and we've yet to see where they're going to be in Scotland. And at the same time, we've got the 21-22 Scottish budget, which has included significant budgetary increases for several areas that are intertwined with the wider marine economy. However, determining where to begin will all be challenging, and in a small way, some of the discussions which we'll hear this week are intended to add to that and help advance the debate. So the stage is set for what I hope will be, and I'm sure will be, a really interesting week. So what does the week look like? Well, in terms of what's on the table for discussion, I've got a number of colleagues and external speakers covering a broad range of relevant issues facing the marine economy. Just to give you a flavour of each day's live lunch sessions, tomorrow the session will cover technology, innovation and research. 2 of my fellow Harper Macleod partners will be joined by Paul Chapman of Marks & Clark's patent attorneys and look at recent developments in marine technology and innovation. On Wednesday, one of our senior associates will look at all things trade in a post-Brexit world, and in particular, what impact Brexit is having on fishing and fisheries. Through our Marine Economy Initiative, we're doing an increasing amount of work with Norway, and I'm delighted to say that we have the first of our international speakers on Wednesday. Trond Hatland from Norwegian law firm Thommessen will join the event to bring an international perspective and non-EU perspective from Norway of the current post-Brexit fisheries and aqua outlook. And then on Thursday, we're turning our attention to all things vessels, finance and funding. The session will be hosted by 2 of my partners who have vast experience in the vessel purchase and finance option market. And our second overseas guest joins them that day on Thursday, who is Mike Besgen of Damen Shipyards in the Netherlands, who will discuss what he's seeing in the vessel market space. And then on Friday, we close the week with our energy team leading discussion on the current marine and offshore renewable outlook in Scotland. They will be joined by Jason Schofield of Green Marine Energy Support Services, who are based in Orkney. Hopefully it becomes clear then the week ahead is testament to the diversity of the marine economy, and we'll aim to do our best to cover areas that are relevant to everyone who is registered to attend. However, turning to today, it's important at the start of the week that we set the scene correctly, and so we have some detailed analysis of the global, Scottish, and because the north of Scotland has got so much of the UK and Scotland's coastline and coastal waters, Highlands and Islands perspective. I'm delighted to be joined by Morven Cameron, Head of Universities Education and Skills at Highlands and Islands Enterprise. Highlands and Islands Enterprise is the economic and community development agency for the north and west of Scotland, covering a diverse region from Shetland to Argyll and from the Outer Hebrides to Moray. The area makes up more than half of Scotland's landmass. Morven, thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to your talk. Over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thank you for that introduction. Just check you're hearing me okay, yes?
Yeah, can hear you fine. Thanks, Morven.
Great. Okay, thanks. So as I think Chiara's going to put the slides up for people to be viewing while I'm talking. As per the introduction, I work with Highlands and Islands Enterprise. I have a remit that particularly focuses on university education and skills, and also population challenges for our region. But about 4 years ago, I led a piece of work which was actually prompted by the UK government looking at science and innovation audits across the whole of the UK, really trying to identify innovation niche areas where you've got the cluster of academia and business and opportunity for a particular part of the UK. It was partly to inform the place-based strategy for the industrial strategy as it was then. Anyway, so it launched me into looking much more widely at the marine economy, and hence why I'm with you today. So really what I hope to do, as Chris has said, is to set the scene, provide some food for thought, spotlight some of the fantastic marine sectors, particularly of our region. You'll forgive me for being a little bit biased and spending perhaps a bit more time in the Highlands and Islands. It's certainly my area of more knowledge. And really, for us all, I think, on the call to think about what more needs to be done or could be done to optimise the marine economy for Scotland, for where we've got such a fantastic opportunity. So I'm going to take you through some slides that will look at, firstly, at global, secondly, a bit of Scotland, and then moving on to the Highlands and Islands. So we've already touched on this, but I will largely refer to the marine economy, but it will be both, because the blue economy is definitely sticking. You'll have heard from Chris sort of introduction to the sectors, and there's different variations and definitions that you see depending on different reports that exist. But this one here captures what you would refer to as some established sectors, some emerging sectors, and then some of the enablers. So you wouldn't be surprised to see aquaculture, fish processing, fisheries, ports, warehousing and water projects, shipbuilding and repair, coastal tourism, marine extraction and marine maritime as being fairly recognised, well-recognised sectors of the blue economy. Underneath that, you'll see in this particular teardrop or piece of water, you'll see the sort of more emerging sectors being described: the desalination, coastal and environmental protection, offshore wind energy, ocean energy in particular, and the blue bioeconomy. And in many ways, as far as Scotland is concerned, and certainly the Highlands and Islands, it's these emerging sectors that we see huge opportunity with. And then the enablers underneath that, we've talked about the skill requirements, the shared infrastructure requirements that support our broader blue economy, the sustainable use of the sea, environmental protection, maritime spatial planning, maritime security, and data. And the definition there that I'm using here for today is from the World Bank in 2017, which describes the blue or marine economy as the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods and jobs while preserving the health of the ocean ecosystem. So if we move on to the next slide, this will cover the trends that we're seeing globally. So ultimately, we are looking at a growing reliance on the sea for our resources, which has been driven by a growing global population and resource demand, and facilitated by innovations in the offshore energy, aquaculture, and seabed mining sectors. We're anticipating a doubling of the global ocean economy to $3 trillion by 2030, including strong growth in emerging sectors that I've just touched on, and particularly including offshore wind. We're going to be experiencing busier seas, including a doubling of global trade by 2031, and a new infrastructure related to marine resource extraction. There's the use of autonomy and robotics, which is improving our understanding. So every day, every week, new information is being gathered, which can provide some more information relating to a particular sector or the protection of our seas. And that is changing the different sectors and how they're operating. Climate change and other human activities are obviously going to compound declining fish stocks, coastal infrastructure, and other economic activities that rely on a healthy and resilient marine environment. Can't talk about the blue economy without being concerned with and very much taking care of our environment. So there have been some long-term trends in marine biodiversity facing growing threats linked to human activities. Sea level rise is expected to increase the regularity of coastal flooding. Ocean warming of between 1.2 to 3.2 degrees centigrade, depending on emissions, is projected. Plus evidence showing that this causes a decline in cold water fish species. Plastic in the ocean is projected to treble between 2015 and 2025, which I know horrifies all of us. And chemical pollution is an ongoing issue. So all of that going on, it's probably no wonder that we are particularly interested and keen to ensure how we take forward this economy in a careful manner. Next couple of slides just show a couple of graphs to try and give a bit of a sense of the global marine economy. Now, this is somewhat old data, but it serves the purpose of just giving you that scene setting. So it shows you in the one hand, on the left-hand side, the global jobs, of which, a huge amount are linked to fisheries, which I think reflects the wider world and more underdeveloped communities where fishing is a huge livelihood. And then, of course, if you then look across to the gross value added, the value of each of these sectors, it changes quite significantly. Another point to mention in this particular graph is the number of jobs connected to coastal tourism, and that will be a theme throughout a bit of this morning and as we think about the marine economy this week. My concern is that the coastal tourism does tend to bring into it, depending on which set of statistics or figures you're looking at, it brings in a set of kind of coastal tourism, if you like, hospitality, hotels. So it's it sort of leans into the hospitality sector. So it can sometimes skew that particular scale. And you can see the GVA from oil and gas, which of course we're expecting to be reducing over the coming time. The next graph just gives a comparison across for global EU, UK and Scotland in terms of the different sectors. Now, obviously not all the sectors are represented, and some sectors are better in terms of the information we have to hand. But you can at least get a sense of the areas that Scotland is holding its own on in the oil and gas, aquaculture, fisheries, ports and harbours. And also you can see in terms of the marine renewables, whilst we're not registered there, it just confirms that it is a relatively new sector, and we're still struggling to get our hands on all the data that's required to progress that. If we want to move on to the next slide, what I wanted to do with this was just to give a bit of a sense of what's going on in other parts of the world. There's been a number of reports commissioned, whether that's through the government or through Highlands Enterprise and Scottish Enterprise and Crown Estate Scotland. We've been looking at other countries and how they've been organising their sort of marine strategy, their marine economy strategy. And we've compared notes with countries and regions. So we've looked at Canada, we've looked at Denmark, Iceland, Ireland, Germany, Norway, obviously, Portugal, and some regions such as Brittany and Canary Islands and Washington State, just to compare notes as to how everybody is faring. A number of countries are really promoting their marine economy in a significant way. If we start looking just briefly at Iceland, population of 340,000, of which 7,800 jobs are linked to the blue economy. They've really embraced the idea of an ocean cluster, where they're bringing together, connecting enterprises, knowledge, the knowledge sector across the marine industries. And they started that clustering back in about 2012, and they now have over 70 companies. Remember, it's a small country, who are coming together to look at the whole ocean value chain, from fisheries to seafood biotech companies. One of their projects is an exciting one, which is looking at a 100% fish project, whereby they basically look at every aspect of what they can gain economic value from the fish, from its liver to omega oil, fish leather, cosmetics, etc. It's a fascinating project, and they've created a really, really excellent cluster there. When you look at Canada, the ocean supercluster there has obviously had massive investment of around 14 billion Canadian dollars to support the ocean sector in Canada. And they are particularly looking at their strategies, particularly keen to eliminate sector silos and promote co-investment in business solutions in order to address costs and challenges associated with ocean innovation. If we look at Ireland, 4.8 million there, so they have their own strategy as well, which they've been working on and developed, I think, back in 2017, and they're doing a huge amount within the ocean economy. They talk about it being 2.2% of their national jobs are linked to the ocean economy. And they are particularly strong in tourism, progressive policy, collaboration, innovation and technology, and supporting blue economy growth. And they do a lot of work in partnership with Scotland as well, and that's definitely a relationship to be encouraged. Moving quickly, the final sort of journey around the globe would be to look at Norway, where I think pretty much well known, 5.3 million population of a country, very similar to Scotland in population. The 173,000 jobs linked to the blue economy. And GVA of 71 million. They have huge strengths, particularly in oil and gas and aquaculture, and they're diversifying technology and expertise from oil and gas industry very quickly, and supporting lots of emerging areas of the blue economy. One aspect of looking at Norway, if you look at Tromsø right up in the north, where they've created this hotspot for cold biotech, where they've brought together enterprises and R&D organisations to really optimise their blue economy, looking at research and commercialisation of marine bioactive compounds, etc. Interestingly, from our point of view, from HIE's point of view, is the effect that has had on the demography, and the number of jobs growing up in the north part of Norway is fascinating, and we're very keen to look more closely at that. If we move on a bit now to the next set of slides, which are going to just start to look at Scotland, you can see here that the Scottish economy in 2018 generated 4.3 billion in gross value added and accounted for 3% of the overall Scottish economy. the slide that you have there basically speaks for itself. Again, it only covers about 70% of the marine economy sectors, but you can see the huge reliance there on oil and gas services as currently sits. You can see the importance of transport-related activity, again, marine tourism and recreation, and fish-related activity. So it doesn't yet, at this point, in this particular slide, reflect marine renewables. And if we move on to the next slide, this has been taken from one of the reports that we've commissioned recently. It just tries to show, again, the comparison of the different subsectors within the Scottish economy of GVA turnover and employment. And the bottom, I think the order goes with the GVA order. So you can see that support and the value of oil and gas is still significant, and the number of jobs is also significant. But again, there is that slight skew with marine tourism, which perhaps over exaggerates the size of that particular sector. We'll look at that a bit more closely. So this is just to give you an idea of where these different subsectors are sitting within the Scottish marine economy. The next slide really looks a bit more to the future in terms of where things might move going forward. If you want to move on to the next slide, Ciara. And it is really just pointing out where the growth is likely to come from over the next 10 years. Aquaculture, clearly we're expecting growth. We can see that just even with the investment that's taking place in the country at the moment. Fisheries, I think there's maybe some concerns over that relating to post-Brexit and how things settle post-Brexit. You can see a reduction in oil and gas in terms of GVA forecast, and a huge increase in marine renewables. So no surprises there, but it's really quite good to see it in that very prominent form. And the work around our ports and shipbuilding and transport are important too. And the next slide, looking at Scotland, is touching partly on Scottish employment, but also giving a bit of a comparison across all these sectors in terms of the 4.3 billion and GVA, the 10,000 jobs, and the 74,000 jobs and the GVA per head. I think the map here highlights really where the total employment is. It's at high levels, and you can see from that particular map that the higher levels of employment in the Highlands and Islands in particular, but obviously very particularly in Argyll and in Shetland. And I think a key point from my perspective is that the blue economy is of particular importance to Scotland's rural and island communities, and Chris touched on that at the beginning. Supporting the delivery of a blue economy will enhance the resilience of our rural, island and coastal communities, and the map provides examples of this relative importance. So I'm going to then take the opportunity to kind of segue into the Highlands and Islands now, if that's okay, and just really give you an overview of some of the sectors and the importance in the region. The first couple of graphics there really just talk about where we got to 3-4 years ago, where we were starting to recognise within a European context that the Highlands and Islands really did come to the forefront when it came to specialisation across the blue economy and blue sectors. It shouldn't have been a surprise to us, but it's not very often you see maps where the Highlands and Islands is showing that degree of specialisation. And the other graph really was an internal piece of work we commissioned to look at future growth sectors. And you can see there that the ones that came in terms of more radical opportunities and market opportunities, and particularly international markets, were wave and tidal, engineering services for harsh environments, aquaculture, related marine products and natural products. If we move on to the next slide, what this is really just trying to give a sense of the scale breakdown across the Highlands and Islands. You can see the GVA turnover and employment for the marine economy, and then it shows as a percentage of all industries. So if you look at the bottom left-hand part of the graph, it shows a 5% GVA and for the Highlands and Islands total of the marine economy as a percentage of the overall Highlands and Islands economy, and 8% of the employment. But even within that, you can see the quite different perspectives, if you were taking Moray and Highland out, for instance, that 5% would become 9%, and in employment terms, that would become 12%. So we have a heavy reliance of the blue economy sectors across the Highlands and Islands economy, but particularly in the western coasts, the Northern Islands and the general island communities. It's just worth being aware of that. The next slide just really touches on what I will go on a bit more and look into. These sectors on the right-hand side, aquaculture, marine biotech, marine renewables, marine tourism and fisheries, are possibly the most prominent from our perspective going forward as we grow our blue economy. The graphic at the bottom left-hand side was the front cover of the Science and Innovation Audit that I mentioned previously, which served to prove our niche and specialism within the blue economy across the Highlands and Islands. But we particularly were looking through the lens of wave and tidal, marine biotechnology, and the aquaculture. And as Chris also mentioned, it reaffirmed the sheer scale of the region's coastline. So not surprising just how important that is for our particular economy. So I'm going to take you through each of these in order, starting with aquaculture. If we move on to the next couple of slides, and just really explain, I think the graph itself shows you where a lot of the salmon production is. Overall, the aquaculture generated 230 million GVA in 2018, which accounted for 7.17% of the overall Scottish economy and 6% of the marine economy. The aquaculture industry provided employment for 2,238 people, contributing to 0.08% of the total Scottish employment and 3% of marine economy employment. There's been a lot of work with the aquaculture sector. It's really very, very strongly come together as a sector, industry, government and the agencies alike to create the opportunity to position aquaculture as a really strong area moving forward. And again, just to reflect on the fact that a lot of the aquaculture certainly within Scotland, it takes place in the Highlands and Islands. But within the Highlands and Islands, it's very much in our west coast and up into our Northern Isles. So there's a bit of an east-west divide when it comes to aquaculture. The next slide really is just talking about the thoughts on going forward. Certainly the aquaculture sector is taking great steps to work towards sustainability of its produce going forward. We will see a growth in jobs in rural populations, which will be hugely helpful in terms of addressing and helping us with our areas of depopulation. We'll expect to see continued investment for growth, and we're seeing it constantly, actually, from international salmon producers, with capital expenditure of around £100 million year on year anticipated for at least the next 10 years. We're anticipating most immediate investments to be in new recirculation technologies to grow larger smolts in hatcheries. We're expecting to see increased automation in processing, creating higher value employment opportunities in primary and value-add activity. Further ahead, we hope to see investments to enable the sector to fully embed renewable energy into all farm activities. We're currently doing a piece of work as well to look at whether or not offshore wind provides an opportunity for offshore aquaculture. We need to try and test that within the different sectors. And fundamentally, we'll also see an improvement in rural connectivity with satellites to inform real-time activities, best practice and environmental sustainable growth. If we move on to the next sector, which is marine biotechnology, I would suggest that this is a huge opportunity for Scotland and the Highlands and Islands that we've really not quite yet got our head round. We know that algae is a unique natural resource for Scotland due to the availability, where its most abundant sources in Scotland from the UK perspective. Cutting-edge research and development in seaweed cultivation. You have to just look at SAMS and Dunstaffnage and the work they're doing in researching all the different compounds and values of seaweed. Huge amount of academic expertise, although arguably there could be more, given that we've still got a lot to learn. And we also have the largest culture collection of microalgae. So I think there's huge amounts of opportunities. I think previously and currently these have been about low value applications, but the opportunity really is hugely important in terms of finding novel bioactive chemicals, looking at a whole range of other uses of algae as we go forward. So the next slide plays a little bit into the growth of the number of companies. I would say it's not wrong to say that we are getting inquiries, if not weekly, certainly every fortnight, from businesses that are interested in seaweed products, in using different marine biotechnology processes. And there's a growing number of companies that are doing very special and exciting things with our marine produce and developing new products that the general population seem to be showing a lot of interest in. So I think huge opportunities for the marine biotechnology sector moving forward. If we move on to marine energy, I've got a few slides here. I'm not going to go into a great bit of detail, but it's really just important, I guess, to capture the huge number of opportunities across the Highlands and Scotland, of course. So the first slide there really touches on marine energy, looking at offshore wind. And many of you perhaps on the call will be very aware of the Scotland leasing round and the opportunities, both economic jobs creation and looking at all aspects of the sector going forward. So we've supported that through supporting the Deep Wind Cluster, which now has over 560 members, and it brings together ports, harbours and infrastructure, looking to serve as a focus for the surrounding maritime coastal communities. Huge opportunities within offshore wind. If we move on to the next slide, I just want to capture EMEC, the European Marine Energy Centre, has been a massive investment from Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, Highlands Enterprise, over the last 20 years with about £36 million of public investment. That was really quite a gamble. It was a risky decision to take to establish a wave and tidal test centre 20 years ago. But my goodness, are we benefiting from that now? And I think that it's worth thinking about that in the context of some of the other emerging sectors. What other gambles, what other risks do we need to take in terms of providing some of that infrastructure that will be the future of, for instance, the marine biotechnology and what we do with that going forward. So EMEC has been a great story in terms of how it's now moved on and it's grown to be a sizable company with major investments and successfully securing lots of European and international projects. The next slide touches on Wave Energy Scotland, which was established in 2014 as a subsidiary of HIE. This slide speaks for itself. 95 contracts, £41 million invested across 230 organisations working across 13 countries. There's been 5 innovation programmes set up and 2 half-scale wave energy devices deploying at EMEC in 2021. So great effort being taken to try and grasp the opportunity of wave energy for Scotland and for, I guess, the UK and for the world when it comes down to it. The next slide is looking at just sticking with the wave and tidal energy, and you're seeing there Orkney leading the way in global marine energy research and development and commercialisation. So again, it has benefited from EMEC's ability to place Orkney at the centre of testing and demonstration. But in other places, and some other slides will show you that too, you can see Kishorn Port and Dry Dock has another facility whereby they are hoping to be they offer the unique infrastructure to support floating wind manufacture, assembly, fabrication and decommissioning. These are investments that HIE have made as well, and I'll come on to that just shortly. Moving on to the next few slides, so that this one here really just gives you a map of where there's been a series of major infrastructure investments by HIE and other investors and the Scottish Government. And since 2010, we've invested over £66 million in this infrastructure. And you can see we're covering all parts of the Highlands and Islands. So we're trying to cover all aspects of the marine economy. The next few slides look a bit more at some of these. If we can move on, Chiara. So the offshore wind, looking at the Cromarty Firth facilities, the port of Cromarty Firth. You can see there's been investment there. Looking at Nig Energy Park as well. I'm just referring back to a note I've got here. Where it's been identified as a premier oil and gas site, but with a growing diversification portfolio in offshore wind. There's been some recent investments in NIG in order to ensure it is capable of grasping the opportunities round about offshore wind going forward. So some major investments across the whole of the region. I think the next slide, if I can remember which one would take us to after that. So we're going up north to Shetland, looking at deep water facilities in Dales Vole. Looking at onshore decommissioning, but also a range of recycling and disposal activities. Also, deep water port proposals have placed Shetland into a really good key position for optimising that. And the final slide really in the marine energy piece is simply capturing the opportunities that basically oil and gas is allowing us to do to diversify into the other aspects of the blue economy. I'm conscious of a bit of time, so I'm probably going to just quite quickly move on to the last 3 or 4 slides, maybe it's 5. If we look at marine tourism, it is an important part of our economy, generated £579 million GVA in 2018. And again, it provides employment for 29,000. You can look at marine tourism in lots of different ways. Certainly, the sailing aspect of it is valuable. You can see there's been quite a bit of, there's been a growth particularly in the West Coast sailing opportunity, which attracts 55% of the visitor boat nights and generates around 11 million. And the sector itself is taking great strides in terms of promoting and developing the sector. And you can see there's more than just sailing. The next slide captures, in fact, if you click it twice, Chiara, it captures cruise tourism. At 2017 was estimated to be over 72 million. Obviously, it's taken a huge hit during COVID time. It's difficult to know what the sector is going to look like once we get into some sense of a recovery. It clearly will still play a part in Scotland, but to what extent, particularly when we look at net zero and the need for decarbonising of transport going forward. I think the final slide in terms of the sector is just looking very briefly at fishing. I think that it's an important sector to Scotland. In 2018, it generated £301 million of GVA. You can also see that a significant amount of that fishing activity takes place in the Highlands and Islands, with 63% of the 2,033 fishing vessels based here. Some parts of the region rely more heavily. Certainly, Shetland Isles has got 22% of jobs that are dependent on it from the broad seafood agenda. Brexit is posing some challenges. There have been lots of ongoing intense discussions on quota, concerns about non-tariff barriers arising from new customs, and you can read the slides yourself at your own leisure. So it remains important, and we clearly need to progress it and support that industry going forward. I think the final couple of slides, we're really going to focus on, and I'm conscious of time, so I will just be very quick, the fact that we are looking at the research and innovation and education assets, the science that takes place across Scotland to support a marine economy is going to be hugely important going forward. We are well geared up in Scotland, but actually there's a huge amount of additional research required to unearth the challenges with working in harsh environments and to support some of the new technologies around about marine biotech, etc. The next slide is really just giving a snapshot of Scottish Association for Marine Science, just to give you an idea of the sheer scale of research that sits in our region. And the following slide gives a pretty picture of what's going on at the European Marine Science Park, which is where SAMS is located and has made a number of investments. The next one, just moving quickly, is also showing that we're investing significantly in Orkney, in the Research and Innovation Campus up there, where we've put £6 million into developing the campus, which includes EMEC and Heriot-Watt University, and other sectors are represented in there. Conscious of time, so apologies. I think my last couple of slides provide a little bit of an overview of HIE's investments over the last 3 years, £47 million in marine-related activities, specific investments in the EMSP, investments in innovation centres, and in R&D in particular. And it also highlights the fact that there's a huge number of growth deal projects, in total about £750 million investment over the next 10 years in the Highlands and Islands, but the ones I've noted there are particularly relevant to the blue economy and worth being aware of. And I think moving on to the final slide, you'll be glad to know, sorry about my timing, folks, really just to confirm that the marine economy is growing globally, and we don't want to be left behind. Scotland and our region has a massive opportunity to build its marine economy, but it needs to do so in a planned and coordinated way. Collaboration across the sectors and geographies will be crucial. Scope for new jobs and industries will be significant, particularly in rural parts of our geography. The need for investment in R&D to support and develop new technologies will be a major part of our approach going forward. Needing to look at marine regulatory frameworks to see how we govern and we oversee the developments. And we need to build a research and skills capacity. As Chris alluded to, we're delighted that the Programme for Government in September announced the development of a Blue Economy Action Plan, and we're working with colleagues in the Scottish Government to help inform that strategy and action plan going forward. And I'll stop there with apologies for probably going on talking too much.
Thanks, Morven. That was excellent. A really good start to the week, and a really good, well done for covering such a large area in such a short space of time. Hopefully that was useful for you in bringing some of the areas that you know less about to life. Just in case you didn't catch it, the slides will be made available to the attendees afterwards, and we'll get them into circulation. Right, my colleagues will be amazed that I can manage to do this, but I'm going to try to pick up on a couple of questions that have come in. So let me just try and do this. Morven, question one from an anonymous. Given the projected growth of the marine economy, how will we attract the number of new skilled workers to do these jobs?
Yeah, it's a good question, and particularly as it's not the only area of growth. If you look at other sectors within Scotland, particularly just broadly the nature-based jobs that are going to be growing going forward, I think we have to look a lot to growing our own, and we have to be looking at supporting the education and training and skills in our region in particular, because so many of our young people, given the demographics, tend to leave to maybe go elsewhere. I think that we have got to do quite a bit of sales, a bit of promotion of the sectors. I think some of these sectors have a bad reputation. It's great to see some of the aquaculture work that the sector's doing there to show the exciting types of jobs and the exciting experience of working in these sectors. So I think there's a bit of promotion, and there's certainly being as direct as we can about the provision that we have on offer across Scotland to support the growing jobs opportunities in the marine economy.
Thanks, Morven. Okay, another question here. You and I both touched upon collaboration being very important across all the sectors. Given the geography of Scotland, and in particular Highlands and Islands, how can we encourage and support businesses to work together to tackle the challenges of the harsh marine environment?
I think that connecting businesses is really important. For the MAXiMAR work we did for the Science Innovation Audit, we brought a number of workshops together, and we had cross sectors, and we had some really rich and exciting discussions with different marine sectors, businesses talking to each other and coming up with ideas literally in the workshop, which I'm hoping some of them picked up on. And I think the opportunity to try and create that collaboration is difficult. There's a cluster builder activity going on at Aquaterra, leading on for Scotland at the moment, which is trying to mesh together the different sectors. So that will help because it will provide events and bring together the different industries. I think providing places for people to be together. If you think of the ocean cluster in Iceland, in Reykjavik, which I visited, a fantastic large building full of 70 to 100 companies who are all, meeting over the coffee to exchange ideas. So there's something about providing some physical space for businesses to come together so that they can exchange notes and look at joined up opportunities. So there's a lot of cluster building work, I think, to do. And that's not just the Highlands and Islands, but that's connecting it with the rest of Scotland as well, and Europe, of course.
Yeah, and just making a link then to a question that's just come in from Nick Lambert. On that point about just kind of the join up between both Highlands and Islands and out with. If I pick up on Nick's question, he's saying, do you envisage coordinating the blue economy work in Scotland with that of England, Wales, Ireland, elsewhere? Is there anything you can talk to on that, Morven?
Well, I think it would be crazy not to. I mean, it's one coastline. Even if we have the biggest part of it, it would absolutely be the case. And I think that will see itself through a lot of the research and science initiatives that we're already seeing, where there's huge partnering up across the different universities for the different science that's going on. And I think it is really just about ensuring that if we're talking about shellfish, we can't not talk about other aspects of that shellfish sector in different parts of the UK. So clearly we will need to be working with all partners, but it will be great to get our own blue economy strategy sort of fixed, and that helps us engage with the Irish in particular, who are quite advanced in that particular area as well.
Thanks. Let's go to a different area then. So Matt Roberts, hi Matt, he's talking about net zero, and you mentioned cruise liners and such like in the cruise market, dented as a result of COVID, but also in relation to what they need to achieve for net zero targets. Matt's saying, do we have a view on the value of blue carbon investment in things like kelp, seagrass and salt marsh management for the offsets market?
Well, I think I don't know if I have a complete view on it, but I think it's certainly something we're starting to hear and see with I think one of the challenges, we're discussing it just last week, is getting an absolute value on that. There's many, many different reports that exist that try to capture the different values of let's say, seaweed in particular. I think we need to try and bring all these together and do something fairly definitive and overarching that captures what that value is. And we look at that, the potential for that offsetting to take place. So we're already getting inquiries and interest in it, but I don't think we've got enough of the properly organised data yet to be able to sort of, commercialise it or monetize it in that sense. You can see the same with our peatlands. It's a challenge that we need to try and optimise. But I think everywhere I go now, there's a lot of being discussed about it, and some leadership on that will be helpful, I think, going forward. Yeah,
in fact, you beat me to it, because I was going to make the kind of comparison with the peatland management. There was a session took place in our recent renewables conference on just the new interest level and kind of power behind which we're driving that forward. The other thing to say, Matt, is that I suspect, and I'll maybe just encourage my colleagues who are taking tomorrow's session to pick up on some of that as well. It's focusing on seaweed, salmon and submarines. So it's all about the tech associated with these areas. And so I'll maybe ask them if they can build in some carbon offset stuff into that as well. Just another question. I'll maybe just take one final question here. So Sheila Keith, hi Sheila. I'm going to read our question, but I suspect this might be out with the realms of this session, which is, how are we going to manage and protect the existing successful marine economy, such as seafood sectors, whilst also addressing all these new opportunities?
I think the challenge that we as an organisation face is that we kind of want to do all of that.
Yeah.
But there are limitations. There's limitations in resources, etc. We certainly will want to continue to support our fantastic seafood industries and all of the things that are going on at the moment. I think that there's a difference between supporting an industry supply chain and the businesses itself, and where we actually take quite a leading strategic and tactical role with a new emerging sector, where we have to try and help sort of provide the profile and build an understanding around about it. And so I think we sort of separate our sort of business as usual activities to supporting sectors alongside those that we recognise, such as the blue economy, particularly kind of aquaculture, marine biotech, where we need to take a slightly more all-encompassing approach, working with government, influencing the development of the sector. So we can do both, but resources are limited, so it's frustrating at times.
And so, just sorry, I said that was the final question. If I just tag on to that, then as you have demonstrated what HIE has done in the context of all these different projects, then Morven, trying to link this to Sheila's point as well, how do HIE decide what to support and where? Whether it be kind of old marine economy versus new marine economy, if you follow.
Well, it's incredibly difficult, Chris. I think we're facing that all the time. There's lots of competing requirements, particularly at this time of COVID and the sort of emergency work we've been doing, which has taken away a lot of our capacity to be future thinking as we would normally like to be. So I'm quite keen to get to a point where we can do more of that. We have to look at a whole range of different objectives. So on the one hand, we've got communities in the West Coast which are depopulating and have particular challenges. If there are aspects of the blue economy that can support them, that's a big, important step for us. But we also have to create jobs and the green jobs, etc., etc. So I guess the quick answer is that it's a constant challenge for us to be weighing up the different outputs of particular projects in order to help make the right kind of decision based upon the limited budget that we have. But my goodness, we're trying really hard to do the right things at the right time in the right place as well.
Okay, thanks, Morven. Morven, thank you very much again for putting so much work into the presentation. It's clear from the comments in the chat box that everybody has really enjoyed that. Hopefully the session was useful to you all in identifying opportunities and the scale of the market, and maybe giving you a flavour of those areas that you hadn't heard about. Please look out for our marine economy blogs and articles, and follow us on our Twitter account, HM Marine Economy. Just to remind you again, sessions this week in kind of short form are Tuesdays all about tech, Wednesdays about trade, bite-sized Brexit and Norway, Thursdays about vessels and floating things, and Fridays about the marine energy and renewables market. And we're looking forward in particular to hearing from all the external speakers we have at those, as well as my colleagues. Meantime, thank you to so many of you for giving up your lunchtime. We appreciate you joining, and we're looking forward to seeing you again at some or all of the sessions later in the week. Okay, enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.